And welcome back to the NFL Quick Talk podcast. As always, you can find the show on YouTube and Spotify. Subscribe and follow. And if you're on Spotify, give us a 5-star rating as well. We have continued our quest to 100 subscribers. So if you haven't already, please subscribe. I promise that you will not be the last subscriber. The channel has been growing significantly over the past couple weeks. And we have set up the Patreon page. I have the link in the description. For $1, you can become a Patreon, unlocking special posts and videos. Today, we are doing the best division in football, hands down, the AFC North. I was so pumped to get ready and do this. I have so many details that I probably won't be able to get to, but I'd be happy to share in the comments if you want them. But with that being said, let's get right into them. And we will be starting off with the Cleveland Browns. I have their overall roster at a B+. Let me start off by saying that this has to be the year for head coach Kevin Stefanski. He has to prove himself. He has been on the decline ever since his rookie year. He didn't even win a playoff game. That one win versus the Steelers came when he was sick with COVID in the COVID year. So he hasn't even won a playoff game. His win total has gone down the past 3 years that he has been coaching. So if he really wants to be with the Browns long term, in my opinion, he has to have a really good year this year. If he keeps going down with that win total, if he gets seven or below wins like he had last year, then I think it's really going to spell trouble for his tenureship with the Browns. And getting those wins really depends on the play of Deshaun Watson. If he plays like he did in Houston, they're a Super Bowl contender. If he plays like he did last year, where he barely beat a terrible Texans team, where he had 0 TDs and 131 yards passing in that game, they're going to be in deep trouble. And going along with last year, he never scored more than 14 points in a game. So if we get that Deshaun Watson, then I think that the season could be very long. My personal opinion is that it'll be somewhere in the both. He'll play pretty efficiently, but he'll play more of a reserved role in Houston. When he was with the Texans, he was playing like everywhere. He was playing 4 different positions. He was being everything for that team. He'll take a more reserved role, and they'll win a fair amount of games this season. Nick Chubb is still a top 5 running back, and the O-line is always great. The defensive line is a little weak in the middle. I have some questions in the middle. But with Myles Sanders and Zadarius Smith coming off the edges, I think that they'll be just fine. The linebackers are, I think, the main weak point in this roster with, besides JOK. I can't pronounce his last name, so I have to do the initials. But I think that past him, the linebacker room is really weak, and I think that they will need to address that as the season progresses. The secondary has 2 solid corners in Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome. When they're healthy, they've both had their health problems. Going through the Browns' schedule now, they open up at home versus Cincinnati. There have been questions about Joe Burrow's health. I expect him to play throughout the whole game, barring another injury. I think the Browns lose this game. At Pittsburgh on a Monday, Pittsburgh's going to be rocking in that house, a Monday night game. Cleveland loses this game as well. They come back home, play the Titans, get their first win here. Play Baltimore at home. I think this is a loss. Going into the bye week 1 and 3, you fix up some issues. You play a very tough San Francisco 49ers team. I think you lose this game as well, but you get a win versus Indianapolis. Going to Seattle, I think Seattle's a very tough environment. I think this is a loss versus Arizona. You get a win here at Baltimore and versus Pittsburgh. These are 2 wins here. At Denver, you lose here, but then going to the Rams, playing at home versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, versus the Bears, and at the Houston Texans are all wins. You ripped off 4 wins in a row to stay in contention. But these last 2 games, a Thursday night game versus the Jets, and then a game at the Cincinnati Bengals, I have them losing to take them to 9-8. Moving on to the Baltimore Ravens, I have their overall roster at a B+. When Lamar Jackson, their quarterback, is healthy, he is a great elite QB. He has elite arm strength, although he can get a little wild and throw some interceptions at times, and he has elite running ability. The only year he has been fully healthy, though, was his rookie year. Every year past that, he's played in the league 5 years. Besides his rookie year, the last 4 years that he's played in the league, he has missed at least a game. And these past 2 years, he has missed 5 games. So 10 games in 2 years. Can we really expect him to be fully healthy for all 17 games? I argue that you can't. The way he plays is very detrimental to his overall health. It will help them win games in the short term, but in the long term, he injures himself quite often. That being said, the receivers got a lot better with getting an older Odell Beckham Jr., although he can probably still play at a high level, and Zay Flowers in the first round. And by the way, they have a top 3 tight end in Mark Andrews. The defensive line took a hit losing Calais Campbell, and they probably will not perform the way they have in the past couple of years. The linebackers are definitely the strongest position group on the roster, with players like Roquon Smith, who's a top 5, top 3 linebacker in the league. And, oh, by the way, Justin Tucker is the best kicker in the world right now. He is elite at what he does. Moving to the Ravens schedule, week 1 you play versus the Texans. This should be a statement win here. At the Bengals in week 2, that'll be too tough. That's a loss. Versus the Colts in week 3, and at the Browns in week 4. I think these are both wins, although the Browns game could be very easily flipped either way. At the Steelers in week 5, I think that it'll be too hard of a place to play this early in the season. I think that's a loss. At the Titans, well, really, the Titans in London, that's a win. Versus the Lions, I think this is a loss. At the Cardinals, that's a win. Versus the Seahawks, that's a loss. Versus the Browns, that's a loss. At the Bengals Thursday night, I think you pick up a win here. Very hard game there. Another very hard game, I think, coming off back-to-back very hard games. I think you lose at the Chargers on Sunday night, going into the bye week 6-6. Versus the Rams and at the Jaguars in weeks 14 and 15. These are wins. Monday night at the 49ers. This is going to be a great game to watch in week 16. But I have the Ravens losing this game. Versus the Dolphins, this is a win. And versus Steelers in week 18, you pick up a statement win there to close out your season 10-7. Moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, there has been a lot of hate on the Steelers this season. And if their preseason is any indication of what the season will be like, they're Super Bowl contenders. That's why we play the preseason, though the preseason doesn't mean squat. I have their overall roster at a B+. In a rebuilding season last year, the Steelers had 9 wins. The roster overall got better than last season's roster, so there's no reason to think that they won't eclipse double-digit wins. The offensive line got better with the addition of Super Bowl guard Isaiah Suamalu from the Eagles and a first-rounder in Broderick Jones at the tackle position. Consistent QB play will be a key for this team. I think it's really going to be one of the main reasons that they step up this season, because last season you had Mitch Trubisky taking 4 or 5 games, 6 games, I can't remember, because Pickett had concussions early on. And then you had a Pickett coming in, his first NFL action. He was kind of wild. I think that he has really honed it in, though. Without a lingering foot injury, Najee Harris should play at a high level again. Wide receivers are pretty nasty with a menace, George Pickens. If you've seen any of his catches recently, he is still up to par with his catches that he had last season, and he's basically a rich man's Odell Beckham Jr. at this point. His catches are ridiculous, the way he goes up and gets them. The D-line is still the best in the league. Oh, and I forgot to mention getting Allen Robinson in the free agency. No, they traded for him. Yeah, they did. Getting Allen Robinson from the Rams in a trade doesn't hurt the wide receiver core either. Going to that D-line. The D-line is the best defensive line in the whole league, with players like TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith coming off the edges, one of the best duos in the league. And then you got all sorts of depth in the interior with Larry Ogunjobi and Cam Hayward and second-rounder Keanu Benton. The linebackers do need time to gel. They revamped the whole roster, just looking at the linebackers, bringing in a Super Bowl winner in Landon Roberts and a tackling machine in Cole Holcomb and a Pro Bowler in Kwan Alexander. I think it'll take time to gel for those guys, so expect a little bit of a rough patch with those guys. But I think the roster overall looks very solid for the Steelers looking into the season. Moving to the Steelers' schedule, week 1 you play versus the 49ers. This will be a very tough game. for them. I think that they lose this game. Versus the Browns on Monday Night Football, like I said earlier, Pittsburgh will be rocking on Monday night. I think that's a win. At the Raiders on Sunday night, this will be a tough game, I will admit, for the Steelers. I think that they pull this one out, though. At the Texans, I think this is a win, and playing at home versus the Ravens, I think this is a win going into your bye week, 4-1. You pick up another win at the Rams. Their roster is atrocious. They should be able to win with ease there. Versus the Jaguars, though, in week 8, I think that the Jaguars will be too tough to defeat. I think you lose there. Versus the Titans on Thursday night, this is a win. Versus the Packers, that's a win also. At the Browns, I think this will be too tough of a game to handle. I think you lose this game. Same going into week 12. At the Bengals, I think this is a loss as well. But you come out of those two road games, you come home for 2 games playing the Cardinals. I think this is a win. And playing the Patriots on Thursday night, I don't expect the Patriots to do too much this year. I think that's a win as well. At the Colts, I think this is a win, but a game that could go either way, in my opinion. Versus the Bengals, I think that's a loss. At the Seahawks, a game that a lot of people are telling me that the Steelers are going to lose, but I think that the Steelers pull this one out. They could definitely lose the Seahawks, though. I can concede that. And then at the Ravens in Week 18, I think this is a loss, going 11-6. With this roster and a very easy schedule, 11 wins is definitely not out of the equation for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals, I have their overall roster at an A-. Zach Taylor is one of the most underrated coaches in the league. This guy gets no street cred at all, and what he has done in Cincinnati is just build a championship team. And I don't know what you have to do to be a good coach in this league if he doesn't have any street cred for just building a championship caliber team. They have the best wide receiver room in the league with players like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and they're all coming back to play with one of the elites in the league with Joe Burrow. The offensive line should improve mightily, gaining Orlando Brown Jr. The linebackers are really good with players like Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt. I think the defensive line is a little overrated. I don't think Trey Hendrickson is quite on the level as some people are putting him, but nevertheless, it's still solid. The secondary is led by 2 studs in Chidobe Awuzie and the young Cam Taylor-Britt. So I think this Bengals roster is slightly ahead of all the other rosters in the AFC North. But again, all these rosters together, just as a side note, are really really good. And there's really not that much separation between all 3 of them. If I were to give one slight edge, I would give it to the Ravens with the B pluses, you could say. But I do think the Bengals have a slightly better roster than the rest of them, pretty much solely because of that wide receiver room. It is really, really good. Moving on to the Bengals schedule at week 1 at Cleveland. I think this is a win. You get wins versus Baltimore, versus the Rams, at the Titans, and at the Cardinals. These are all wins. Versus Seattle, you lose your first game here. Seattle will upset a lot of teams this year. Going into your bye week, 5-1. Coming out of the bye week at San Francisco, this is a win. Versus Buffalo, this is a win. At Houston Texans, that's a win. At the Ravens, though, you pick up a loss here. Coming home playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's a win. At the Jaguars, that's a loss. Versus Indianapolis, versus the Vikings, and at the Steelers, those are 3 wins right there. At Kansas City, probably the toughest game of the year for them, that's a loss. And then coming home to play Cleveland in the last game of the season, I think that's a win. Finishing the season 13-4. So there you have it, the AFC North, the best division in football by far. I don't think there's really an argument for anyone else. The Browns at 9-8, a B-plus roster. Ravens 10-7, B-plus roster. Steelers 11-6, B-plus roster. And Bengals 13-4, A-minus roster. And thank you guys for watching so much, sticking through to the end. We have done every single division in football, gearing up for the season. So if you haven't watched any of the other divisions in football, I have them all covered, all down. And I will give my playoff scenarios soon and what to expect from that based off of my predictions. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel. We're trying to get to 100 subscribers, as I said earlier. Be one of them. All right, and I'll see you on the flip side for the next video.